I had one other question, and this was sort of my reaction in diving into Atlassian's engineering handbook because I'm a total resource nut. I've written a number of different guides for different programs and things. So when you stumble across a very well written guide that operationalizes really great culture, you pay attention. And so when I was looking at the categories of the things that you'll talk about, so you define how you work at Atlassian, how everybody stays informed in the communication protocols, the software development process and how things are shipped, and then all the way towards like the how do things are operated and maintained. So when I'm reading this, I'm like, man, everybody should have this type of documentation that defines all of these things because oftentimes they're implicit and not described, and it makes it really hard for people to figure out, well, how do I work effectively within this group? So when you're looking at all that, I think like the big question I think I'm trying to figure out is if I'm working with somebody who has, maybe a 50-person team and they're like, shoot, we need to reinvent everything. Nobody knows what's going on. We need to define this. Is there like an MVP of those categories or like the most critical information you would include to help empower people to move towards more autonomous teams? Like, I guess what's the most critical information that you want to make sure they answer in those parts?
Yeah, so I'll talk about what they need to consider. Right, they can take different pieces and write their own. And I have some startups who are much smaller who are thinking through and saying, "Wow, these are good categories, but we don't want to do exactly what you do." And that's actually true even for us. We haven't talked about our people side, and we can talk about that. We rolled out a process recently on how do we do career growth and growing people. It's called Project Pascal. And when we did this Project Pascal, there were lots of places where we could do everything at once or we could do incrementally. And the incremental aspect of let's start with something and then grow from there is important. So my advice for people is start with something, write something, and create a culture where people can add input to that and keep revving it up. Because the hardest part is to start and with a starting place and then create a system and process where it can be improved over time. You don't have to be perfect. In fact, we weren't perfect on many of these. And even today, if you ask me, there are a number of places where it's like, yeah, it says that, but we're actually working on the next system, which is completely different. Right? So that's the higher meta level. The other thing to also consider there is try to see not to make it top down, because it's easy when you think about processes to make it top down. And if you read the handbook, many of the things that we do at Atlassian is at the team level and for the teams. We don't have like check gates where they can't ship without talking to architects or without talking to somebody. Right? There are those reviews, but mostly to help them learn and not as a, oh, here's a gate, you can't pass through the gate if you don't have these criteria. And that's true even for SLOs and the reliability and security things. We have different teams own the security scorecards, and it's their goal to improve that to a higher number, but it's not like somebody is going to stop them shipping anything if they don't hit that number.
You brought up Project Pascal, and so we were definitely going to get into that in 1 second. But I think just one more quick follow up question. So you said principles and prioritization as like the first place. It makes it really easy to build off of in alignment with your company values. Is there is there another section you would have somebody start with to do this, to start with something outside of defining your prioritization and principles first? Is there like another part that you found more helpful than, maybe not more helpful, but like you'd say that's probably the next
Yeah.
next thing you'd look at?
Yeah, when you talk about process, there are places where you want the process to be well buttoned, and the areas there where you want the process to be really oiled, well oiled, is in security and reliability. Right, so the security incident management process, or the incident management process, you want that to be highly documented, prescriptive, and teams to be having the muscle and having these uh, desktop things and trainings and making sure that they understand what happens when an incident comes, because that's how you start reducing time to recover and time to detect. And you want to make sure that that process is highly structured and is in place, right? Especially for all the cloud companies that want to operate at pretty high scale.